Yo, what's happening, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Free to Grow CFO Podcast, where we're diving deep into conversations about scaling a D2C brand with a profit-focused mindset. I'm your host, Jon Blair, founder of Free to Grow CFO. We're the go-to outsourced finance and accounting firm for 8- and 9-figure D2C brands. And today, I'm here with my buddy Michael True, co-founder and CEO of Prescient AI. Michael, what's happening, man?
What's up, John? Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, dude, I don't know if you guys are feeling the same way, but we're like kind of in this sprint right now between Thanksgiving and like the Christmas season in terms of like, I don't know if you guys are seeing the same thing, but in our world, everyone has gotten through Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So they're starting to think about 2025, what improvements they may need to make for us on the accounting and finance front. I'm sure there's people thinking about how to measure their marketing better, but are you guys kind of a race to the finish line before people start disappearing for Christmas?
It's interesting this year where, there was some brands, I would say, that pre-Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we're starting to think about tech stacks for 2025. And then we've got some inbounds and some re-engagements post-Black Friday, Cyber Monday, really digging into 2025. We made it a pretty clear priority or a pretty clear requirement. During certain weeks, there was no outreach to anybody that was not a customer. Just let people, stay heads down on one of their, busier times of the season. So,
For sure.
For
sure, man. Well, I'm stoked to have you on the show. Today, we're going to be talking about, marketing measurement, I'll say in general, but more specifically, getting more specific about marketing mix modeling, which you guys do over at Prescient AI, versus what I'll call the more traditional click-based attribution, which is what I would say the vast majority of founders in the D2C world that we operate in are used to using to measure marketing performance. But before we dig into that on a more detailed level, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and your journey to founding Prescient AI.
Yeah, so my background has always been in big tech. I was largely in the database world at Oracle, IBM, then moved into the analytics world over at IBM, and then into their Watson team, which was, I don't know if the folks might remember, is this little AI thing that beat Ken Jenner on Jeopardy.
Yep, definitely remember
long
that.
Time ago. So my focus is predominantly on financial services and in the healthcare system, flying around, deploying software across, at that time, physical servers like an x86 server, and then started to see the migration to the cloud. It was just nothing to do with D2C for a long time until recently. I met my co-founder, Cody. I had been dabbling around with some ideas in the AI space and found myself into the music space trying to predict tours for record labels, and COVID hit and touring went away. Got really lucky that happened, honestly, because the focus had shifted for labels. When COVID hit, everybody's inside. Well, what are people going to do when they're inside? They're not going to go to a tour. They're going to stream music.
Yeah, sure.
So there's attribution in the music industry had not really existed because there's no Google Analytics behind Spotify and Apple, so there's no last click.
Interesting.
So I met my co-founder, Cody. Like to consider him the Michael Jordan of research science in this field. He's a very competitive researcher. We met and, he started building models, and I started selling models to a major label. And they did a really good job of being able to measure, forecast, and optimize marketing spend for, Cardi B and some really cool artists during their early 2020, 2021.
That's awesome, man. I actually was a touring heavy metal musician for a number of years. And so I've this is real. That's probably a whole nother podcast episode, but the music business is interesting in a number of different ways. But, I'd love to, so how did you go from that kind of marketing analytics in the label world to, kind of this focus on e-commerce, digital advertising in more of the D2C or omni-channel e-com space?
Yeah, great question. It was March of 2021, and we predicted Cardi B's #1 single up at 96.3% accurate by recommending the label to shift from X channel to X channel, X channel to X channel, and then predict how many streams she'd get compared to their existing spend. Predicted at 96.3% accurate was a big win for us, and we weren't too sure what we were going to do next with the technology. but I'm sure everybody on here will remember April 26th of 2021, the day when Apple announced iOS 14.5.
For sure.
And my co-founder called me and was like, hey, which industry do you want to go to? He's like, I think we should go raise capital, and I think we should build a SaaS platform. This model can work across any dollar spent online. Like, which vertical do you want to start with? So we talked to like healthcare and financial services, and ultimately made the bet on e-commerce at the time, because just like streaming, e-commerce was exploding. And we had made a bet that the technologies that were being applied to solve for iOS 14.5 at the time was the right call, right? It was Meta, people were
Yeah,
still pumping on Meta Google, and a
for
Pixel
sure.
was could really solve for that. We had some prescient, which means having knowledge or foresight of an event before it occurs, that brands would start to want to scale into top of funnel. They would want to go more omni-channel. And we're going to have about a 2-year head start on the research of these models, because MMM is the only thing that matters is the math, right? It's all that matters is the math. And we had math and infrastructure. We had a head start. And so, yeah, we started in D2C, shipped into Amazon. We're coming out with a retail model here in Q1 as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. I love that. I want to start with just like the fundamentals, because I think that we work with dozens of D2C brands, and I think still, well, no, I mean, it's very clear that still, kind of the go-to is Triple Whale, which has a number of different issues in my personal opinion. But I think they're starting to, the vast majority of brands are starting to get exposed to this concept of marketing mix modeling. So like at a basic level, what is it, and how does it differ from traditional kind of click-based attribution?
Yeah, for sure. I'll first and foremost say it's like the MMM is not the source of truth. The MTA is not the source of truth. Incrementality is maybe the closest thing at a point in time you're going to get to source of truth.
Sure.
Source of truth is the marketer. There's just a variety of different ways to measure something that are trying to give you the ability to do data like measurement triangulation. I'd say a good example. We send Triple Whale, I don't know, 2 to 5 deals every week for sure.
Hmm.
And so I guess the difference of a brand that would come to us and say, hey, we're on Shopify, we're on Meta and Google. They don't need an MMM. They're going to onboard to our platform and then leave our platform because it's just, they don't need that sort of measurement at the time, right? But when you're a brand that is starting to go into YouTube, TikTok, podcast, linear, TV, new channels like AppLovin,
Hmm.
really top of funnel. If they have a D2C plus Amazon presence, even better fit for an MMM model. And so what an MMM is not trying to do is trying to say, Jon Blair saw this ad, click this ad, click this ad, and have a deterministic customer journey. What an MMM is trying to do, I always say, like, an MTA is going to tell you a lot about a little. So it's going to tell you a lot about some of the transactions that came through deterministically. Traditionally, a media mix model would tell you a little about a lot. So it's going to tell you a little bit about the relationships between all of your channels in your revenue on kind of a time series path, right? So one is a statistical model, and then one is a deterministic model. So what is that causal relationship to, hey, I'm increasing my spend. I'm sure a lot of the brands have seen this. I'm increasing my Meta spend and my YouTube spend, but I'm starting to see some of my Amazon sales go up, or I'm starting to see some of my retail sales go up, or I'm starting to see our top of funnel for just our D2C store, right? I'm starting to see like our last click is starting to take a whole bunch of credit where maybe it didn't deserve to have that credit in the first place.
For sure. So am I correct in saying that like when we're talking about a brand where a tool like yours and just marketing mix modeling in general can start to become really valuable is when they have heavy top of funnel spend and they have more than one channel where sales are potentially converting, that the more top of funnel spend you have and the more sales channels you have, the more potentially valuable marketing mix modeling can become. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
I wouldn't isolate it to being a requirement to be an omni-channel sales brand, but if you're a brand that's like four, we like to see 5 channels and above. We call it like our sweet spot. 4 to 5 is considered a good fit for us. 3 to 4 it gets kind of dicey. Anything less than 3 is just not a good fit for this.
For
But
sure.
we'll have some brands, and then there's a sense of like we have brands that are on Shopify and they're Meta, Google, YouTube, and we'll talk to them saying, well, we're planning to go into Tatari next year we're planning to go heavy into podcasts. We'll onboard them to the platform so our models can start learning their data from the channels they were spending on. And then as they start to layer on these new channels, we're able to pick them up, at a much higher, much faster, if you will, to start being able to give them a pulse on how that new channel is performing.
So when if you have a brand that is in that sweet spot, we'll call it 5 channels, right? Heavy top of funnel spend. If they are sticking with um one of these more traditional click based attribution tools like Triple Whale, what are some of the things that common pitfalls that you see that might get brands into trouble if they're just using something like that and they're not considering using marketing mix modeling for measurement?
Well, a pixel or an MTA is not designed to measure a statistical relationship between views and revenue. It's really looking for that click. And so when you get more biased towards bottom of funnel, it's not going to allow you to
Mm-hmm.
feel as confident in the measurement of, hey, how is this heavily view based channel like connected TV or YouTube
Sure.
actually driving our sales? And so when we, quick aside on this, like when we first came in to decide to start with e-commerce, I interviewed close to 100 D2C marketers. And the thing that I found out is I was trying to get to their why of like, why measurement, like what is it? What is this why? A lot of people, like, I just got married. I want to buy a house. I'm paying off student loans. I have all these bills to pay. And I'm coming into work and I'm being tasked to scale this business. I know that I can't do it anymore on just these 2 channels. I need to go into these top of funnel channels. And I just want to feel confident every day that like
For sure.
I'm gonna make the right bet, right? And so
Totally.
without leveraging an MMM, which they're designed to do, that level of confidence is not as strong when you're making those spending decisions.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean for sure. It's in the post iOS 14 world, I'm always hesitant to say post iOS 14 world just because it's like such a cliche at this point, right? But like I've been in e-commerce for long enough to know what it was like then and what it's like now and how different things are from in terms of having that confidence of like I'm spending $1 here and it's driving this. I feel confident in the connection to the revenue it's driving, right? In the post iOS 14 world, and I'll just say it's actually not iOS 14 in my opinion. It's that e-commerce is becoming more saturated, right? It's still growing. It's still growing at a nice clip, but there is a low barrier to entry to just fire up a Shopify store and fire up an Amazon seller account and start spending ad dollars. It doesn't mean that every brand is really sound with their marketing fundamentals or has really great products or even has a great customer experience, but there is a lot of competition, right? And so because of that, it's driving brands to have to be really um, meticulous about understanding how profitable their spend is in any channel. And I would even venture to say that in many cases, the average brand is having to expand into more than just a Shopify channel a lot quicker than they used to have to, say, 7 years ago. 7 years ago, you'd still could be like a first mover in a product category, D2C. And I mean, like at Guardian Bikes, when I was at Guardian, we brought on a lot of people who left Tuft and Needle after they merged with Sealy Simmons. And they scaled to 9 figures in revenue with very little top of funnel. A lot of it was Google bottom of funnel, like because they were the first mattress company to sell mattresses and people were already searching it. That's a way different game than like I need to find the next new set of eyeballs that I need to get to, right? I need to keep leaning into top of funnel and I think I need to get into a new channel. And I don't have a lot of confidence of how that's going to impact the bottom line. So it is a stressful thing. I would say the one that we see most commonly, and I've talked with Will Holtz, who works with you quite a bit about this, um, is understanding the difference between or how to think about how Shopify versus Amazon is performing when you're spending heavily on a top of funnel channel like Meta or YouTube. We see that all the time with the brands that we work with, right? And what I can tell you from a CFO's perspective is that there's no doubt that they're connected, right? But measuring the degree to which they're connected, right, is a different story. What kind of advice do you have, or maybe um, maybe not even just advice, like how can a tool like Prescient help with understanding? You're spending heavily on top of funnel channels. You've got an Amazon store and a Shopify store. Like how can you guys help a brand discern how that top of funnel spend is driving each of those storefronts?
Yeah, and again, it comes down to the triangulation of, hey, what are you seeing within your Amazon store, right? That's very deterministically based off of the conversions that are taking place in there. With Prescient and typically MMMs, you would see an MMM run once a quarter, and this is a big education thing we've been working with people on. It's like once a quarter, maybe once a month. It's at the channel level, and it's giving you a cross-channel media measurement and maybe some recommendations on how to spend. What's unique to our platform, it allows people to test and iterate very quickly. So we have what we call halo effects, which essentially is we're taking credit from the bottom of funnel. So search across Amazon, search across Bing and Google, and we're redistributing that credit up to the top of the funnel where we have the highest confidence that the likelihood that the awareness from this campaign is actually what drove conversions over onto Amazon. So for us, we do this at the individual campaign level. The models will run every single day. And so as you start to shift and test new spends, based off of what you're seeing with our halo effect. So a good use case of this would be, a large cookware brand was spending on Mountain, and when they were looking inside of Mountain, the performance was not that strong, but we were showing incredibly strong performance. Well, because Mountain was only measuring over to their D2C store, right? And so when we started to say, actually, there's a lot of people that are sitting on, their TV, probably on their laptops, they see your ad and then they go search, can we find a Prime deal on Amazon and go search that
Yep.
way. So the granularity of what we're allowed them to do is being able to make very rapid and dynamic decisions on how to reshift their spend for non-Amazon ads and then look at that impact and quantify that impact over time compared to, how they were previously spending before. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you have any other examples that come to mind of like how you've helped one of your clients like really unlock but make decisions based off of the data in your platform to really enhance, I mean, obviously scale, but at the end of the day, profitable scale?
But there was a brand, about $100 million beauty brand, and they had Tatari turned on. He's become a good buddy of mine. He had Tatari turned on. I'm actually down in Austin with you. And he turned it off because they needed above a 3 ROAS. And so it was, I think they had a 2.67. So when they onboarded Tatari, and they can go back a year. And so he's like, I think that there were these 2 campaigns that were actually pumping that weren't getting credit. So we onboarded him. We had all of like what the platform reported as was being shown, and we hadn't run the model yet. Bing was showing like a 22 ROAS, and he's like, dude, that's way too high. I'm like, so what do you think it is when we run the model? He's like, I think it's a 6. So we turned on the model, ran a couple days later, the insights come back, and we had Bing at a 4.65. So the delta between 22 and 4.65, we're going to be redistributing that credit up to campaigns at the top of the funnel. Now, they are a D2C plus Amazon brand, and their ROAS was actually just under 4.5. And so they turned Tatari back on. And when they turned it on, they were able to go back and look at some of these like saturation plots, right? We'll be able to show them like, hey, where's your sweet spot of spending? You're if you spend $2 and make $10, you can't expect to spend $2 million and make $10 million. Eventually, there's going to be some
For
diminishing
sure.
returns. And
Yep.
so our team would work with them, and we started very carefully scaling and testing the Tatari channel after they onboarded. And, we'll be coming out with a pretty cool use case here in the coming weeks of how they're able to successfully scale that channel and continue to scale that to this day, continuously optimize the spend. And so it was a retroactive play of saying, hey, I onboarded to the tool. I was able to go investigate and confirm some of my hypotheses before with your MMM. We turned the TV back on, worked with our team to scale it, and seeing great promising results from there.
So I'm actually curious, and I think probably maybe specifically in the retail channel, like physical retail, but there's probably some other top of funnel channels that I'm not thinking of that probably have the same issue. How do you guys deal with, we'll use retail as an example. You've got a channel where the sales, the actual bottom of the funnel, like sales conversion signal might be delayed depending on what retailer you're using and how quickly that data is available. How does that play into your models being able to provide insights about a channel where like it may take a little bit to understand really what sell through is.
You're saying the example would be you have a brand that's selling in, Target, Walmart,
For
Costco,
sure.
and that retail data might come in at a certain granularity. You might get some DMA level data that comes in weekly versus just total
For
sales
sure.
that comes in monthly. Is that what you're
Sure.
asking?
Yeah. Like, how do you guys advise brands on working with these data sets that come in? It's not like plugging into a Shopify store, right? Or an Amazon store. What is some advice, or how do you guys work with some of those channels to get as timely insights as possible?
Yeah, so we leverage all of their existing media channels. So the data that when they onboard to our D2C chip platform, it's 12 to 16 minutes, point and click, and just all of that, all of your paid social, your GA, and your Amazon D2C data. For retail, it really comes down to we have some retail clients that own their own POS and own brick and mortar stores, and that
Mm,
just data comes into a database. We
yeah,
pull it
that's
from there,
nice.
and we can run the model. Oh, but there's other examples where you're getting Costco data once a month. We've come out with what we call it's like a configuration offering. It's more of you have a dedicated research scientist, right? You have a dedicated engineer, and our team is working with you on just getting exports of that sales data. We ingest
Nice.
it, we run it through our models, and then we actually come back with like a customized retail readout, which is going to show them the exact same thing as you would see with your D2C within our D2C SaaS platform. So where are you overspending? Where are you underspending? What is that optimal budget? How accurately are we back testing against the last 12 weeks of your sales? Um, the last read we just did was at 98.2% accurate, which was remarkable to see as researchers in this field.
Nice.
But it's a very similar output. It's just a human walking you through based off of whatever cadence you're going to be getting the sales data from. So it's a little bit more customized offering.
That stuff's super important because we've worked with several brands that are in the higher eight figures, pushing into nine figures, and physical retail becomes kind of like a must at that point, right? Like in this day and age, it's not to say that there aren't e-com brands that reach nine figures. There are, but I see them as the exception, not the rule. It's not like back in the day, Tuft and Needle could get to 150, 200 million and not have to get into physical retail. Where that ship has sailed. But so um, we're advising a lot of brands that are on the upper end of eight figures and pushing nine, like how to think about how to think about the fact that like these are all heavy top of funnel digital advertising spenders, Meta, YouTube, maybe even connected TV, and like that absolutely drives the physical retail channel to some degree as well, right? It's not a
No
completely
question.
separate channel. So for you guys to be able to provide some analytics about that is like I think incredibly, incredibly important because in the past, I'd say like 7 to 10 years ago, retail was kind of this black hole if you're a D2C brand expanding into physical retail. And I was like, hey, I I'm sure we are driving some demand, but measuring exactly what we're driving is really, really hard. I would even venture to say, and I'd be interested to know if you have any kind of anecdotal kind of evidence of this, but like I've actually even seen if you can start proving out a connection between your spend and sell through um, inside of a physical retailer, you can actually really start influencing the buyer's decisions on future purchase orders, showing like, hey, you're getting free advertising spend from our efforts on Facebook and YouTube. And here we've got this great model that Prescient AI put together for us where we can actually show you that. Like to me, I think that's a huge game changer when it comes to negotiating to with buyers at Targets and some of the big retailers.
Yeah, so we'll 100%, right? Because with the models, it's going to forecast out. And if they get in data, we have a mattress company. If you get data by the DMA level, we can actually start forecasting out what we think those predicted sales are going to be over the next quarter by DMA and start forecasting out what we think the change of CAC or new customers or ROAS is going to be by DMA or product category or SKU by DMA. And so it gives them a lot more ammunition to being able to go have those conversations. Another interesting thing, I think, just for folks that are thinking about the omnichannel kind of retail spaces, We spoke with both Meta and Google, and Google Meta has now coming out with like a kind of think about it like an Advantage Plus shopping, like that sort of programmatic model, if you will, but
Yeah.
doing it and being able to tie sales from their digital ads into retail stores. So the same thing
Mm,
with Google being able to do
yeah.
that, and then if they're able to track your phone and have the IP address, seeing a conversion in that location of that store, now they're starting to trying to stitch together that relationship, just as we're just doing it across all channels, but Meta and Google are now
Interesting.
starting to try to optimize for that as well.
That's interesting, man. So I'm curious, like one because Free to Grow, we work specifically with fast growing, profit focused ecom brands. They don't have a bunch of venture backing, right? So like every incremental dollar they spend on ad spend, they need to have some confidence that it's driving incremental profit, right? Or at least incremental contribution margin dollars. One conversation we're always having with clients is to expect and be able to being able to absorb at diminishing returns over time, because as you're scaling we see diminishing returns. I'm curious, like your models, do diminishing when you talk about forecasting, do a lot of the diminishing returns get factored in based on like statistical models showing those diminishing returns in the historical data? Are there other methods you guys use? I'm just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, we'll plot out. It's one of our biggest I would say selling points is a quick aside on that is typically saturation plots have used linear regression models. Everybody's seen the linear
Yeah,
regression models where they're
for
trying
sure.
to show what is that plot. We figured out a way using some proprietary machine learning models to do non-linear regression models. And so instead of trying to, and what does that mean is a linear regression model is going to assume that connected TV and Meta have a similar shape of saturation, right? Because it's trying to fit that line through the historical
Mm,
data. What we
yep.
try to do is we try to find the shape of the data. So our saturation plots can look like a camel's back. They can look really wonky, right? What it allows us to do is really pinpoint historically what is that sweet spot of where you should be spending, right? But we also allow brands to do is run simulations. And so on the fly, right, you can type in, hey, well, what if I increase my spend to X amount? Right? It's going to show you on the saturation plots where you end up and then what is the forecast over a certain time period compared to your existing spend. So it's kind of like showing what is the incremental growth based off of adjusting my spend from here to here. So we allow the users to manually do that, but now our models just scan every single campaign, factors in things like seasonality of the business, the buying cycles of the products, and it'll tell them exactly how much to spend on each campaign, and then forecast out with a certain level of confidence what we think that predicted CAC will be. What do we think that predicted top line revenue? What do we think that ROAS is going to be? So it's a much more dynamic ability to look at saturation plots and then kind of tinker around and pull levers to see what will happen on the forecast.
That's interesting, man. That's super interesting. I mean, it makes sense. Like the thing about linear, I've seen guys in their content on LinkedIn and Twitter talk about like these linear regression models to basically forecast the diminishing returns of your ROAS or MER. And like the thing is, they're just overly simplistic, in my opinion, and such that like these are real dollars that people are spending that they're nervous to spend. You can't
Yeah.
have like now every model is a model. Like the definition of a model is it is a simplified version of reality, and it's not perfect, right? But it's got to be close enough that you've got some confidence in using it, right? um I'm just curious, like obviously there's details that are like beyond the scope of this conversation, and some of this is proprietary, so like obviously I don't expect us to get into all this, but like walk me through how AI or machine learning is supporting what you guys are doing, and how that is really kind of a game changer, or like a tailwind for you guys for having these really trustworthy models.
I would say the traditional a lot of the MMMs you'll see in the space have leveraged existing research papers that have been used since 1962, right? And some different sort of flavor of that, but they were always designed to do more longer term planning, saying, hey, well, here's how much you should distribute at your channel level. We'll run it a quarter later. We'll do something sort of retroactive, and then being able to try to, learn from this last 3 months to try to make a better decision for next month. These machine learning models, they leverage it like a Bayesian prior. So they have sort of prior beliefs based off of prior belief, meaning what is that saturation plot? What is that measurement? What is that seasonality? Based off of all of the learnings from your historical data. Now, those priors can get updated with new data sets that comes in from in our case, that come in every single day from the ad platforms. So we're seeing what you made on Shopify. We're seeing all your GA data. We're seeing how much you spent by channel, by campaign. What is the reported attribution from the platforms? And those will hit the models, and the prior beliefs can change based off of the measurement. You can
Hmm.
change the measurement and the forecast based off of that new data that's coming in. And so it's kind of an always on robot that gets smarter and
Yeah.
smarter as you go. But the key thing, and I would just encourage any folks that are using an MMM or thinking about using an MMM, is they do not like consistency at the same spend thresholds. They want to see as much, experimentation as you can, so you can start to see these saturation plots move. And last point is the unique value of ours is I do that. We use the same dummy. It's an actual client, but we anonymize it. And sometimes we'll come in and do demos, and I'll see 3 days before the saturation plots looked very different as they started to test their spend. So it's very unique to us. You can almost, Cam from HexClass says it really well. He's like, it's kind of weird because yours runs at the frequency of an MTA, runs every day, almost at the granularity of going down to the individual campaign level. And it's doing all of these forecasting optimization models and halo effect models. And so, it's just a lot of statistical math that's learning from as much data as possible and looking for as much change as possible.
That's cool. So, what advice would you give if you got a brand that's healthy 8 figures, scaling they've got multiple channels, let's say they're at 5 or they're approaching 5, and they're interested in getting something like Prescient going, and they do, but what does Prescient replace in the tech stack, and what does it not replace? What are some other things that you think that, because I know that could be a misconception with attribution, right? I see it all the time with like triple well, it's going to do this. No, no, no. It's not going to do that. It is good at this, and I'll give it credit for that. But like, what will it replace, and what will it not replace? And in your opinion, what are some of the other marketing tech stack tools that still should sit alongside a tool like yours?
Me, I'll base it off of like what I see with like the guys at Jones Road and Hexclad of like their form of triangulation, and again they're
Hmm.
very sophisticated in their approaches here. But Cody from Jones Road, I turned on YouTube. We ran an incrementality study, right, and just to validate like the incremental of this new channel, but it's only at a point in time. Then they match that up against what our measurement is, and it matches up, and it's like, well, now I feel confident in what Prescient is saying, and then they would use our optimization model, right? So now they've gained confidence in YouTube. They're looking at us for like, okay, well, what should we do next? Because incrementality is only going to tell you what's happened at a point in time, but what do we do next, and how do we start to measure that on an ongoing basis without have to continuously running all these tests? And so they looked at our saturation plot, scaled that spend. And then he ended up running a 3-cell holdout after, and the results match perfectly. And so now he's validated YouTube with us as this channel, and he feels really confident in scaling that channel. Now, on the other side, a lot of these brands, pretty much every brand we onboard is using an MTA when they start using us, but they realize they need to use us to scale top of funnel. The majority are, large enough and they're hungry for data, and they're using this from a triangulation perspective to look at, creative analytics within inside Triple Whale, because we're only going
Yep.
down to the campaign level. But I
Yep.
have seen recently some of the brands that they're like, hey, I have such a good pulse on my Meta and my Google, right? Through the platforms and just running these channels for so long. Like, do I really need an MTA anymore? If I have such a good pulse, I really need to be focusing on YouTube and TV and making more of an investment and focus on the MMM side of the house. And so I've seen a blend of it across different brands. Some are taking the trifecta of incrementality, MMM plus MTA. I foresee the future being more of an incrementality plus MMM approach.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I think I totally agree with you that regardless of the specific tools you're talking about, that there's this triangulation approach, right? That we recommend the same thing. Brands ask us all the time, what tool should I be using? I'm like, well, I do believe that the answer is different depending on what channels you're spending in, what channels you're selling on. But either way, there's not a single source of truth, right? And generally speaking, platforms, Triple Whale and the like can be great for getting really granular, like you said, like creative testing and measurement of how creative is doing, right? But at the same time, no matter what, and even if you layer in like a Prescient AI alongside that, we still as CFOs need to say, how many contribution margin dollars are we driving every single day? Because that's the financial North Star, is that like as you're scaling up and down, right? That we're actually producing more or less profit, and we know that profit is going in the same or different direction than what these other tools are saying. And so there's a financial there's like a true financial measurement, which for us tends to be contribution margin dollars. You may get really granular with something that's not, an MMM, but then have MMM alongside that, and you can get kind of, I think about it as like a three-dimensional view about how
Nice.
your marketing is performing, right? And so the point that I want to make for the audience is that, like, don't get trapped in thinking there's a single tool that's going to do it all. It comes back to strategically understanding your brand, the channels you spend in, the channels that you sell in, and understanding what you're trying to gain and achieve out of scaling, right? Different brands have different goals, and so you should match your tech stack with the strategy and ultimately the goals that you're trying to achieve. Because at the end of the day, all of these resources and tools, they exist as tools to help you get to where you're trying to go, right? And so
Yeah.
what I was really hoping we could do, which you've done a fantastic job, is like get people to understand where MMM should sit in the tech stack, when it's maybe you're not a good candidate for it, when you are a good candidate for it, and then really what else do you use alongside of it, and I think this is super helpful in that regard. What other I'm assuming you've talked with tons of brands who are considering using your tool. What are some of the common misconceptions you see out there about MMM, where like brand founders are regularly kind of getting it wrong in terms of assuming that the tool can do something that it actually can't?
There's a shift of focus and education that we've learned a lot from. A lot of these brands were never familiar with an MMM before this, right? They came in the 60s, and when the internet came, like, they went away. MTA was there. You could track everybody on the internet. Taking the time to understand and work with us or any MMM is, what is the model trying to tell you and how does the model work, right? And not thinking about it in a lens of an MTA, right?
Yeah,
Shifting
yeah,
that
yeah,
focus and saying, like, what is the larger story here versus across all of our spend, versus really trying to, like, break apart the model, right? Because they're statistical models, right? And so
for
making
sure.
sure that when you onboard one, you're in the right time to use it. And like I mentioned, like, we will not onboard in any brand that is not in the right fit for an MMM, right? And it's the right fit is going to be when you're aggressively looking to scale top of funnel, you're going omni-channel, or you scaled top of funnel in the past and you thought it performed better and you want to go back and look at, you want to look at those results from a more holistic angle.
I love it, man. This is super helpful. So, before we land the plane, though, I always like to end with a personal question. And so, my question for you today is, what's a little known fact about Mike True that people might find shocking or surprising?
A little known fact about Michael Tree that might find shocking or surprising. Wow, it's a really good question.
You heard mine
I might
earlier
be
with
surprised.
the touring metal band. So,
Um, I enjoy jumping out of airplanes, and I still get petrified every time I'm about to do it. But I like
oh
jumping out of
man,
planes. And shout out to Hans from Brewmate. We went in San Diego at the Sunlane conference. This dude walks up with his own gear, and he was like, "Oh, this is my 320th time jumping out of a plane."
I still haven't done
Craziness.
that, man. Kudos to you for being able to do that. That is, I don't know if I ever will. Maybe I will. Maybe
Maybe
I don't know. Who
maybe in
knows?
Austin.
But
Maybe we throw a D2C skydiving
there.
event the
Okay,
third week in
there you
Austin.
go.
Let's go.
There's a way to connect for sure, man.
I love it.
Before we do, no pun intended, land the plane here though, where can people find more information about you and about Prescient AI?
Yeah, I've been very active on LinkedIn this year, so hit me up on LinkedIn. It's Michael True, Prescient AI. I'm on Twitter now, And then, yeah, if anybody wants to just learn about MMM in general, hit me up on LinkedIn or you can reach out to me directly. It's Mike at prescientai.com. And we grab a chat and make sure you get the right people to support you as you think about an MMM.
Yeah, I highly recommend reaching out to Michael if any of this piqued your interest. What they're doing is really, really cool stuff. And, as you're scaling your D2C brand and you're expanding into additional channels and you're leaning more on top of funnel, like there is a place for the tool that they're building in your marketing mix to really understand measurement. And again, be able to scale profitably with confidence. So definitely hit up Michael if you're interested in learning more about this. Also, don't forget, if you want more helpful tips on scaling your profit-focused D2C brand, consider following me, Jon Blair, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in learning more about how Free to Grow's D2C accountants and fractional CFOs can help your brand increase profit and cash flow as you scale, check us out at freetogrowcfo.com. And until next time, scale on. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Thanks, Sammy. Appreciate you.